I am the Great Saiyaman, and I'm gonna beat some fashion sense into you! Oh man, hope my disguise is working. This is Gohan from Dragon Ball Z. You're listening to This Week in Geek with Mike the Birdman Dodd and the rest of the TWIG crew right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Who disrupts my coronation?
Everyone has been destroyed because of this freak! I won't allow it! These babies just saved this lame fest party!
What's going on? You are listening to This Week in Geek, otherwise known as TWIG, the flagship of stupidity. I am your host, Mike the Birdman Dodd, and yet again, I am alone in quarantine. I'm actually really alone because nobody's here in my apartment here in Guelph, Ontario, but I am joined, I was going to say across the pond, but that's not really true. I'm joined across the 401-ish?
Oh, yeah,
yes.
It's by Alex. 401 or... I would like to say that we're more conjoined at the hip with, what was it, Highway 8? Something
yes,
like
something, a little bit of local trivia for you if you happen to know where we are located. So yes, we are back here with yet another TWIG podcast for you to enjoy, download across the many different platforms that we do indeed use. So yes, this is week, I don't even know anymore, of quarantine. I haven't seen the sun myself since March 13th. Make of that what you will. Isolation, I think, is starting to get to me finally. But more or less, it's been okay, I guess. I've been talking with a lot of people online. I'm starting to reach out to Facebook people. I don't know. I'm just trying to find unique ways to pass the time. And as you all know on the show, the ongoing saga, which has finally come to a conclusion, I have finally beaten Persona 5 Royal, which means me and Alex and another guest will hopefully be talking about it sometime next week for a release in the next week or so. So big thanks to Atlas and Sega for providing a review code for me, because my final playthrough, I think, was 152 hours in that game. That game emotionally broke me, as it did the first time round. Didn't cry this time, but it did. I'll say this: it filled in a lot of gaps that needed to be filled in. It made a lot more narrative sense than it did the first time, because I can't remember a lot of things from the first time round. Like, it seems like things were just kind of left up in the air. Like, I don't remember if in the original game. Well, I guess I can't say that until I get into our review. So you're just going to have to listen to that show to find out what happens. But my new, I think the term is waifu. My first waifu was on.
You mean waifu?
Waifu, yeah. My first one was on because she was a model. And, of course, it's me. The second one, I really wanted the romance. And I actually had my Facebook and Twitter had to talk me out of it. Was going with Futaba because I love her story, but I tried to romance Kasumi and I wasn't paying attention during a button pressing section where that's always, I should choose my words carefully. I wasn't paying attention and I went, yeah, whoop. And now we're friends. And I live by the mantra of, I will live by this decision no matter how terrible it is. I don't.
Well, especially since you're the guy that'll play Skyrim 6 million times. There's no reason why you won't play this another couple times over the course of the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. I will eventually experience everything. I just didn't get it on my first playthrough. And though I did get the bromance Valentine's Day, which I'd never seen before. And Morgana is a straight up savage when she tells Ryuji, man, what's it like to have absolutely no game? And Ryuji's like, shut up. And it's funny.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, that's pretty amusing. So, plus every girl gave me chocolate despite not me dating them. So that was pretty cool. So it was neat experiencing that for the first time. So next playthrough, which will probably be at some point, probably during the holidays this year, because we always take a month off at TWIG around February or around December. Though we'll see what happens this year because we're not sure how the whole year is going to play out yet. So.
If main consoles launch in the original, I think projected was like October, beginning of November, it might be something where if they're still in line for this Christmas season, it might not be till like early December. If that's the case, we'll probably still have content running through January, just maybe not as much, maybe more reviews or talks on the new consoles because, you know, by hook or crook, I'm fucking getting the new consoles.
Yeah.
So that at least one of the two, if they're out, between the two of us, at least one of us will have one of the consoles that we can work with.
Yeah, like I'm really hoping to get the new Xbox Series X. I think it has more likelihood of coming out than the PS5 at the current time.
Well, since they manufacture some of that stuff in Mexico, as well as a couple other places, it'll just be staggered. It might be less, I don't know, there might be less availability, but you've had a relationship with Microsoft now like 10 years. I don't have really contact with them except for the occasional, hey, Mike, can you get this game for us to review? But there may be a possibility that through PR connections, we might be able to get something from them. Even like there's been rumors that if the system doesn't come out in full force right away, that they may have loaners to send out to PR people at least.
Yeah, I guess it's just going to be a lot of wait and see because this whole Corona pandemic has most certainly changed everybody's media plans. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the show because a pretty significant event got canceled this past week. So it's going to be interesting times ahead, to say the very least. So obviously I finished Persona 5 Royal. Another game I had a chance to play this week, though I didn't get as far as I wanted to, is not as critically well received as people would like. And I hear my cat crying. Ayla, shut up. That's Resident Evil 3 Remake, which seems more like a DLC to Resident Evil 2, considering its length. Does not justify the price from what I've played. I straight up deleted the Resident Evil multiplayer because I have no interest in playing it whatsoever. I may give my thoughts on it just in the intro of a podcast, so maybe next week. Me and Alex are planning on doing a Final Fantasy VII Remake roundtable. I plan on finishing that this week. In fact, thanks to TWIG friend Jen, she got me the DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake via Butterfinger. So I didn't have to eat any chocolate bars. So Jen, your stomach has made the ultimate sacrifice for me. So thank you very much. I just really want the theme for Final Fantasy VII. I know there's some kind of an exclusive item you can get, but I just want the theme because I'm a sucker for themes. I'm trying to think of what else I've been playing this week. This week's been a lot of Persona, some Resident Evil. I didn't really watch anything this week, which is unusual for me. Actually, no, I did. I did watch something. I was able to see the new Mortal Kombat movie. My God.
Okay.
My God, is that absurd on a whole new level. That's what I wrote to you. I said it was absurd. Its violence is so over the top as to be goofy. It takes you out of the movie because it seems like there's an X-ray attack, which was introduced in like Mortal Kombat 9, I think it was. The one from 2011 anyway. And where you see people's bones being crushed or like their skulls splitting or whatever. It seems like that happens like every 3 minutes. Plus, one of the last kills in the movie is so stupid. And I'm just going to spoil it because it's stupid. Scorpion spears Goro through the back of his head, peels his skull out of his head, and leaves his flesh hanging like fucking Leatherface's mask, while Scorpion pulls his skull out
And
of
this
the
is
back
all
of
with
Goro.
Warner Brothers Studios, right? So
Yeah.
fingers crossed, we end up getting this worked with Scooby Doo, Mortal Kombat meets Scooby Doo.
That would be amazing. It was just it was so weird. And Joel McHale from Community plays Johnny Cage. He's a wonderful Johnny Cage. I'd like to point this out. It's so goofy and stupid. And that's the best way to look at this movie. It's goofy and stupid, but it's fairly respectful of the source material. And the guy who plays Quan Chi sounds like Tony Jaa. So he sounds like Megabyte from Reboot. In fact, this guy could actually do a pretty good Megabyte if they wanted to. So I'm thinking, all right, that's actually pretty cool. So that was an interesting experience I had this week. Obviously avoiding the Rona has been my other primary thing, which I think I'm feeling more wore down since this entire thing is started. I notice I'm sleeping a lot. Like a lot.
That can happen.
What about you? What has your week looked like?
Well, I was recovering from the ridiculous amount of Final Fantasy that I played over Easter weekend. And then it was sort of catching up with a few different review movies here and there and different games. I've been I was looking, I'm like, what can I do to go back and play the other Persona games? Because I have a PlayStation TV, Vita TV, whatever you want to call it. And I own a copy, physical and digital, of Persona 4 Gold. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe going back and playing that isn't the best thing right now. Let's go and play the games I've never heard of, because we have friends that have been saying, hey, the other games are even better, depending on the style of game you want to play. And I was like, okay, well, I own a digital copy, like the digital download of Persona 1, because I have that PlayStation Mini Classic thing. And I was like, nah, what about portable? And yes, you can get this stuff to work on the PlayStation TV, but the controller isn't great. The resolution is hot garbage because it's 720p. And then it blows it up to 4K on my television, and there's no scaling, like no filters or anything. So it's fuzzy. It looks worse than like hooking up like an emulator. And I was like, no, Alex, not cool with that. And then I had some gift card and store credit left over at local used video store, which is still operating by shipping things out to people. And then I was like, you know what? I'll just get a new controller, because I was using a wired PS3 controller with the Vita TV, and I was like, I wanted to have something wireless. I'm like, okay, so I'll just get a used DualShock 4. And the used DualShock 4 was the exact same price as a PSP. And I went, oh, wait a minute. If I remember correctly, those are super hackable and super moddable. And I'm like, because I was like, I'm not going to use like the built-in like 1 gig memory card that they come with. I was like, well, if I want to put more games on, I can use as long as you've like modded it or hacked it, you can actually put your like a micro SD into an adapter and hook it up, and then I can have like 64 gigs, and I could have every game, because I own a lot of games from the PlayStation library that I had bought. Like I had a PSP years ago, bought a bunch of games, and do you remember back in the day before the Vita, sometimes they gave away PSP titles even through when they
PSM.
I think it was the first year or two that they launched, they were giving one game away a month. So I have a bunch of titles there. I purchased the Persona 1 and 2 as well as Persona 3 Portable years ago, forgot I owned them, and I was like, okay, so that would work on the Vita. Put that in on the Vita and went, oh, it looks like crap. And then I was reading, the best way to do it is just on an actual PSP, because I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I spent the last few days tracking down things like new batteries for it, because I figured the battery, it's the fat PSP, the first edition, like that's a 16-year-old battery unless they replaced it. So I was like, okay, I got 2 batteries. And then I was like, well, the screen could be scratched up to crap or whatever. So eventually in the next week or two, I should be receiving a replacement shell, completely see-through, like, some Game Boys used to come like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be crystal, like white see-through, so you can see all the components on the inside, as well as a replacement screen for $12, like a brand new LCD. And I'm like, okay. So it arrived today, just before recording, actually. And there's a couple scuffs on the front of it. Overall, the screen is still okay. But when I'm done with this thing, for out of pocket, less than $50, because I had store credit, I'll have basically a brand new PSP with the 64 gigs of storage, with 2 new batteries, and a brand new case, like a brand new shell for it, and a brand new screen. So like, it's going to be my go-to portable, because I have a DS Lite that I could always go to for some portable things, but I forgot how good the PSP was. Like, it was surprisingly good, especially loading games from the memory card versus the slow UMD. So that's sort of been my project, in quotes, right now. And then I was playing a few other games that I've got for review that, we can't release till a little later, because they're like, please don't talk about this till Tuesday.
Yeah. Speaking of games, I actually went on a bit of a spending spree because I got a little bit of money back. And we're going to talk about what people are spending some of their stimulus checks. I didn't spend any of my stimulus money because I'm Canadian, but I got a few dollars, and I spent like $60 on Switch games. So I took some of your suggestions from Facebook and Twitter, and I picked up Golf Story that was 50% off. So I picked it up for like $10. I picked up Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle on your recommendation. So I'm hoping it'll be good. I got the gold edition, so I figure I got the best possible version of this. I got Vampire the Masquerade, which is the game I was looking forward to. I got what else did I get? That's a good damn question. I got a game called Blazing Chrome, which someone described to me as Contra with a little bit of Ninja Turtles mixed into it. My friend Mark recommended that. And I think there was one more that I picked up on someone else's recommendation. There's one game I want to pick up because it's like $10. I think it's called Valhalla, but it's spelled really weird. It's a cyberpunk bartending game, and it has a pretty cool trailer. So I might pick that up. And then I picked up at the end of March. I still haven't played it yet. I still haven't picked up Animal Crossing New Horizons, but I have it loaded on my system, so I haven't established my island yet. So I'm not yet in debt to Tom Nook, but I'm sure he will eventually extort bells out of me at some point. Because everybody I know is playing that game. In fact, I wonder if the great Switch shortage is over, which we talked about a few weeks ago. I think it was last week, actually. Well, one of my friends just posted on Facebook. She found Switches at Costco in the wild. So I guess the Switches are starting to come back. It's spring and they've come back, and it's wonderful. Because I will eventually have to replace my Switch due to the battery issue that I have with it. But I play mine docked anyway. But I figure with Animal Crossing, I want to be able to sit in bed and play it. So
the one disadvantage of the Switch being so thin and light is if it was, let's say, twice the thickness, it would, double the weight, but it would be thick enough that they could have put a replaceable battery in it.
Yeah, and there were people talking very, very early on about replacing batteries with the Switches. I remember how you could buy extended batteries, but I don't know how much I trusted those. Although,
all those it's basically like a battery pack you buy for your phone, where it's a separate battery that plugs on the bottom, and it will constantly charge the battery till the external is empty.
Yeah, the only mod I've ever done for a Nintendo console, and I even hesitate to use the word mod, this would have been about early 2013. I was sent a battery for review for my Nintendo 3DS, and it added considerable weight to my 3DS, but it made it feel good. It was a nice feeling battery, and my battery for my 3DS, that thing, I could play it, I swear to God, for like 24 hours straight. Because it was a wonderful source of power. So anyway, coming up on the show this week, we have reviews coming to you from the role-playing world of Judge Dredd and Mega City 1. We'll be talking about Judge Dredd in the world of 2000 AD, courtesy of Modiphius. We'll also be taking a look at the Police Academy soundtrack from La La Land Records and a Anthony Hopkins movie where he pretends to be American. We are also going to talk about some of the news that happened around the world this week involving Doctor Strange, Comic-Con, what's going on with that. Some interesting changes in the White House involving some of our geeky things that we like to watch. And finally, what are people spending their stimulus money on? So we'll be back right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net. I've been Mike the Birdman Dodd. He's been Alex, the producer. We're going to take a trip to Mega City 1, where hopefully we will not be arrested by street judges. We'll be back right after this, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
America is an irradiated wasteland. Within it lies a city. Outside the boundary walls, a desert. The cursed earth. Inside the walls, the cursed city, stretching from Boston to Washington, D.C. 800 million people living in the ruin of the old world. And the mega structures of the new one, Mega City 1. Only one thing fighting for order in the chaos. The men and women of the Hall of Justice. Juries. Executioners. Judges.
All right, citizens, this is Judge Mike the Birdman Dodd, and I'm here to deliver judgment upon you with Judge Dredd in the Worlds of 2000 AD, the RPG core rulebook from EN Publishing, and this review was provided courtesy of Modiphius. So this is a game that got kickstarted a while ago, and I recently became aware of it via my press contacts. I got sent this for review, and well, I've always been a fan of the Judge Dredd character. I did see the movie originally when it came back out in 1995. I saw that in theaters like twice. I saw the new one when it came out in 2012 in theaters, which I really wish it did better, but it was awesome. And I've had a chance to revisit the character several times over the past couple of years. So getting a chance to roleplay in the worlds of Judge Dredd, I think is fantastic. I know there was another book that was published, I want to say by Mongoose Publishing, a number of years back, but this brings it up to the future. So what this is like 270 pages plus, I want to say, and the rulebook costs about $20, and I'm reviewing this via PDF. So what you get in here is the full Judge Dredd experience, although, as the title does indicate, it does include the worlds of 2000 AD, which are meant to be included later. So you might get things like Flesh, Necronauts, Astronium, which I think is a new book coming out rather soon, which updates the timeline of Judge Dredd to like 2190 or something like that. But the game primarily takes place during Judge Dredd's rule as a street judge. However, although weirdly enough, this game doesn't give you game stats for Judge Dredd himself. In fact, I have found stats for him online, but he's not included in the main rulebook. And I know there's a couple of different books available, such as The Cursed Earth, The Robot Wars, and Luna 1, but I do not have access to those outside of the Robot Wars, which will be a review coming in likely just a few weeks. So the game itself is primarily based on D6s. You won't be rolling anything else, and it's a dice pool-like system. You'll have so many attribute dice, which will then generate a dice pool. So it's like attribute, skill, plus equipment that equals your dice pool. How many of those you can access is determined by your character's grade, which is essentially like your level. One thing I don't like about this game is I don't like the way it advances levels when it comes to purchasing new grades. I found it a little confusing. In fact, if you wanted to create characters in this, I might just recommend creating them at a more advanced grade as opposed to leveling up. I just think it works out better that way. But then again, maybe I just don't get it. I did read this over the course of several late nights, and maybe I just wasn't processing the information. However, though, character creation, once you get the hang of it, is really kind of fun. There's a lot of flexibility here. Actually, if you search Judge Dredd Online Character Creator, there's a wonderful tutorial that walks you through it, but the book itself actually gives you a step-by-step process telling you what you should have at each particular step along the way, giving you additional skills, attribute bonuses, where you start with a base 3 in every skill with the exception of reputation and psionics, and then you choose what goes on top of that, be it your species. So you can play a human, you can play a clone, which does get some innate advantages. You can play as a robot, you can play as a mutant, and this is kind of interesting. I didn't even know this happened in the worlds of Judge Dredd. You can play an uplifted monkey, so to speak. So you can play a chimpanzee, a gorilla, and an orangutan. So if you want to do some weird Planet of the Apes shit, I suppose you probably could. And there's a lot of fun. Like, I didn't know there was a such thing as a tech judge or a med judge. I knew about psionic judges and whatnot, which is pretty cool, though, just reading the depth of the material. If this book does anything right, it is a wonderful resource for those of you that really like the Judge Dredd universe. It really does give a really deep dive into the material and the tools and equipment used by the Hall of Justice, such as it is. However, though, one thing I'm not particularly a huge fan of, but I can see this being an advantage if you have people playing around a table. Combat in this, it's easy enough, but it really relies a lot on positional cover. So having minis or a battle map is really going to be useful. Like, positioning is everything, whether you're in Overwatch, suppressing fire, whether you're in cover. There's bonuses and environmental things that all apply to this, and it can get a little bit overwhelming from what I've read. I would say this kind of game wouldn't play well to theater of the mind, so to speak, unless you have a really descriptive GM who's constantly telling you you are 5 feet away, you are this, that, and the other thing. As opposed to seeing markers on a map, you'll be able to see where the perps are, where you are, and it can be just a little bit much. However, though, the game does give you some fairly decent flexibility in how you want to approach it from a storytelling perspective. You are given a number of different careers, which I mentioned, which is essentially your what you can do. They're kind of like character classes, but you those grades I mentioned earlier, those tie in. Typically, the starting character starts with 5 grades. A judge character, that'll be like their cadet, advanced training, rookie year, their first year as a street judge or whatever, and then their final. Whereas a person who's a citizen might be a gang member, a journalist, a bartender, what's called a boinger, a person who covers himself and essentially spray cheese and throws himself out a window, and they bounce around like a pinball. It's weird, just trust me. Or you can become a perpetrator. So there's a lot of interesting storytelling possibilities here, more so than I'd seen in a game like this. I would assume Judge Dredd would just focus on the street judges and that'd be the end of it. Though the majority of this book is dedicated towards that, it does give you more interesting possibilities, and with some of the other source books, it does open up those possibilities as well. Like they do mention robots in here, and with the Robot War source book, that does go into a little bit more depth, but like I said, I'll cover that in a few weeks. One of the things I do like, it also gives you a couple of different scenarios, so like a crime blotter, so it gives you how to run this as a perp, as a citizen, and as a judge. There's also a scenario, which I think is based upon one of the earliest Judge Dredd stories, called The State of the Empire, where you're looking for a guy who's murdered a judge, and you're going after a guy who calls himself Judge Whitey, I think it is. It's pretty cool, just how they can tackle that, and I think it's really neat how there's also an entire glossary section dedicated to the slang of Mega City 1 and the world of 2080 in general. So from the ISO cubes, where you will inevitably end up if you cross people, to the kook cubes, which I didn't know that was a thing, where they put people who are psychotic. and they get constantly medicated until they can be sent to regular, or they're just kept in there. But they also talk about this one I found particularly funny. I know in Judge Dredd they have a weird thing with fat people, and they have something called a belly wheel, which can be used for fat people to put underneath their belly so they can walk. And evidently there's competitive eating in this world. It's really weird. But yeah, so can I recommend Judge Dredd in the Worlds of 2000 AD? Well, as a source book, I think it's tremendously interesting. As a game, mechanically, I like the life path system. Once you get the hang of it, it's really neat and does open up some really cool ideas for storytelling. However, that being said, I think having your players invested in the world of 2000 AD will go a long way into creating a really good game experience for them. So that may just be as simple as showing them both Judge Dredd movies, maybe showing them a trade paperback and say, hey, if you like this, we'll play. Combat, however, I could see being a little bit problematic, but I suppose once you run it a few times, you'll get the hang of it, or maybe listen to an actual play podcast. But I'm going to give this a cautious recommend. If you like the idea of upholding the law, then this is something you will probably enjoy immensely. And I am looking forward to reviewing further supplements in this line, simply because I love the idea of Judge Dredd, and I'm very curious to see what the Robot Wars holds for me, and maybe I'll pick up the Cursed Earth and Luna City one at some point. Once again, if you want to check out this is available via Drive-Thru RPG for about $20 from EN Publishing, though this review copy was provided to us via Modifius.
I am the law. Guilty of murder. Guilty of the manufacture and distribution of the narcotic known as slow-mo. And as of now, under sentence of death, you have been warned. Judgment time.
News on the march!
And we are back here on TWIG, the flagship of stupidity. I am Mike the Birdman Dodd. He's Alex, the producer. Let's break down the things that happened around this pandemic-stricken world this week. And, well, we're actually surprisingly late on pandemic news this week. But, you know us. It'll end up that way anyway. So, let's get things going.
This is one of those situations where there was a lot of pandemic news, and two factors. One, a lot of people already covered it, and two, do we need to be depressing?
Exactly. So we're trying to change up our news as best we possibly can. So I do bring to you good tidings of joy. I know there's another part to that sentence. But
comfort and joy.
Comfort and joy. So
comfort and joy. Comfort and joy.
In April.
You're the crazy one that puts your Christmas tree up on Halloween.
I thought about, actually, side story, I tried to convince my wife to put up my Christmas tree a few weeks ago. I'm like, well, I'm going crazy. Let's put up the Christmas tree in April. And she almost did it. But then she said, Michael, we have to put up the air conditioner. I'm thinking, but I want my Christmas tree.
Well, why don't you get yourself a small mini Christmas tree that you can decorate?
They're hard to find at this time of year. Not impossible.
Yeah. I was going to say, I might have one. That or my mom does, and you let us know and Blair can come pick it up.
We'll figure it out. So our first story this week comes courtesy of comicbook.com. So earlier this year, a surprising victim of creative differences was made when it was revealed that Marvel Studios and Doctor Strange director Scott Derrickson had parted ways while developing the upcoming sequel, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Just 1 month later, it was reported that none other than Spider-Man's Sam Raimi had been tapped to direct the film, making an exciting director to be added to the Marvel Studios fold. Marvel never officially confirmed Raimi's involvement with the movie. In fact, Marvel.com still has Derrickson listed as the director, but Raimi himself has now confirmed the news. Speaking on a conference call with comicbook.com and other journalists, Raimi was asked about the scene in Spider-Man 2 that name drops Doctor Strange. The director went on to talk about his adoration for the character and confirmed he is working on the sequel. I loved Doctor Strange as a kid, but he was always after Spider-Man and Batman for me. He was probably at number 5 for me of great comic book characters, Raimi said. He was so original, but when we had that moment in Spider-Man 2, I had no idea we would ever be making a Doctor Strange movie. So it was really funny to me that coincidentally that line was in the movie. I got to say, I wish we'd had the foresight to know I was going to be involved in the project. To his credit, Derrickson himself has had nothing but high praise for Raimi when it was revealed that he would be replacing him as the director of the sequel. Writing on Twitter earlier this year, I've worked with Sam Raimi, one of the nicest people I've known in the film business, and as a director, a true living legend. What a great choice to take over Doctor Strange. Production on the Doctor Strange sequel was originally set to kick off just a few weeks from now, but due to the spread of coronavirus, Marvel Studios and Walt Disney Company have paused all productions, even delayed the entire Phase 4 slate of MCU movies. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was previously set to arrive on May 2021 and is now scheduled to hit theaters in November of 2021. We've yet to hear much about the Doctor Strange sequel will feature, though previously released synopsis teases the return of the Time Stone as well as Baron Mordo. You can see more information below, which you can't because this is a podcast. I think Sam Raimi's a good choice.
Yeah, as long as he doesn't go a little self-indulgent. He, as much as I love the ridiculousness that was like his Xena and Hercules type shows, there's a specific market for that. And I still actually think that kind of show could still come back again, that syndicated fantasy show that he was sort of like pioneer and king of. But he doesn't necessarily handle other people's properties the best way.
I think when you give him the license to play, because it's Marvel and he's not going to want to fuck that up, I think he'll do okay.
He
because
fucked
I
up
think
Spider-Man, and that's Marvel.
I disagree. I think
the third film was terrible. Like even
I can defend
I hated it.
I can defend it, and that's the thing. I found
because you like weird ska and dance numbers.
Okay, that aside, go back and rewatch Spider-Man 3. There are some moments to that movie to like.
See, that's the problem. You said there's some moments to like, and that's not something you should be saying about a movie with Spider-Man.
Well, I do think, obviously, the whole Venom subplot should have been dropped. But having Sandman in there, like Thomas C. Howell, is that it?
No, it wasn't. It was
the guy who played Lowell from Wings.
Thomas Hayden Church.
That's it, Thomas Hayden Church. Sorry, I don't know where I got the other name from.
C. Thomas Howell is the guy from the Outsiders.
Okay, so sorry, I got them confused. But there are some good emotional arcs in that movie. I mean, even the new Goblin stuff, goofy as it may be, does hit a few points where he comes back to like save Peter. And while there are some goofy, as I mentioned, indulgent moments in that movie, I do like Spider-Man 3 more now, but I didn't like it at the time. I remember being mad because of how they disrespected Eddie Brock and casting Topher Grace as the anti-Peter Parker. I can't say it's terrible casting now, because I do think back on it and I get what they were going for. I just, considering how much of a masterpiece Spider-Man 2 was at the time, it wasn't the best choice for them to follow up with. And I know there was a lot of studio interference with it. So,
well, that dance was all him. And
yeah.
I'm sorry, but like it shouldn't taint my view of it, but it was such a horrendous and horrible, like wedged in scene that had no place there, that like, unless he says that he was doing it as a fuck you to the studio or something, just to fuck with people, if he thinks it was actually a good idea to put it in there, he needs to have his head examined.
Well, you think about other Marvel movies that have had similar scenes in it, and they've been let slide. I think of the dance off from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1.
There's a big difference. It's about tone and its placement. This was to the point where it became emo Spider-Man was the meme at the time.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry.
How it was handled was terrible.
How it was presented was, ooh, look at me. I'm rebellious and I'm going to dance. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Then there's a difference between that and your entire personality being around that you're basically stuck in the 80s as a man-child.
Yeah, like, all right, granted. I say if you took out the emo Spidey scene, I think
infinitely better.
Infinitely better.
Except for Eric Foreman as Venom was a terrible idea.
Like I said, I'm willing to let some of that slide now because I've always been a big Venom fan, and it depends if you play him as the antithesis to Peter. But the Venom I knew is the one from the '94 Spider-Man series where he looks like big buff burly man.
Which I have not seen the new Venom movie yet. I don't think many of us have. But Tom Hardy is a much better choice.
Tom Hardy's he's not a bad Venom. I like him.
Now, here's the thing. Had you come at me and said, Eric Foreman is playing Carnage, I'd have been like, oh, that's interesting. Because Carnage is slender and insane.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Even the look on his face when he's going a little crazy, I'm like, oh, he would have made a better Carnage than Venom. I'll say that.
Yeah, I'm almost willing to. That's not terrible because I think about Topher Grace's performance in Predators, where he plays the secret bad guy, and when you give him something to work with, he's not a bad actor.
And he has that, lanky string beanie sort of look. Because if you remember the cartoon, he sort of looks a little more like Carnage.
Yeah. So not terrible, not bad.
I mean, that's all predicated on having to cast him for some reason.
Yeah. Which is, I don't know. I'm hoping Multiverse of Madness does as well as it should, because a lot of it's going to tie into WandaVision, which is the Disney Plus show, which is supposed to come out this year.
Which is six episodes, and each episode is going to look like a different show from time. Like one looks like a 1950s sitcom. Like, I don't know what they're doing. It's like is it parallel worlds? Is it like in her mind?
Well, since from the comics, she has the ability to subtly warp reality.
So she's basically like one episode looks like it's I Love Lucy.
Yeah, it's going to be weird to see how this works out on the screen, because in the comics, she's significantly more powerful to the point where she wiped out 98% of the mutant population and started the entire House of M timeline, where she says no more mutants at one point. So there's a good chance WandaVision may start to lay the seeds for mutants in the Marvel Universe, but it's also going to establish the multiverse as a true thing. And if the Time Stone's going to come back into play in this reality, it'll be interesting to see how this all kind of fits together. In fact, Phase 4, I don't know what they're going for, because now they've introduced time travel. If they're going to introduce parallel worlds, I'm hoping we get Kang the Conqueror or Annihilus as the next big bad, because now that we've done Thanos, it'll be cool regardless. Keeping up with comic book news, this one I'm a little less excited about, but I like the idea. And this one comes courtesy of superherohype.com, and J.J. Abrams, everyone's favorite lens flare director, is bringing Justice League Dark to HBO Max. So earlier this year, it was reported that J.J. Abrams and HBO Max were mulling over the prospect of films and TV shows based on Justice League Dark characters. This news came shortly after Abrams signed a 5-year overall deal with Warner Media, but he never confirmed if this is what he was working on. Now, both camps have made it official. The Hollywood Reporter brings word that Abrams will executive produce as a Justice League Dark series through his Bad Robot banner. The report doesn't mention which characters will show up on the series, which is still without an official title. However, in the comics, the series has included the likes of John Constantine, Swamp Thing, Zatanna, Deadman, and Madame Xanadu, some of whom have already shown up in the live-action DC adaptations. This isn't Hollywood's first stab at bringing Justice League Dark to life. A film version languished in development for years under Guillermo del Toro and Doug Liman, both who left to pursue other endeavors. Justice League Dark is the second major live-action DC series that will hit HBO Max in coming years. Back in October, the streaming service announced plans for a Green Lantern TV show with Arrowverse architect Greg Berlanti producing. James Wan is also producing an Aquaman animated miniseries for the platform as well. Additionally, Abrams is executive producing 2 other shows for HBO Max. One is Overlook Hotel, a spin-off of Stephen King's The Shining. The other is Duster, which is Abrams co-writing with The Walking Dead's LaToya Morgan and centers on a getaway driver for a crime syndicate. Abrams will produce all these series alongside his wife Katie McGrath.
Joy.
I don't know. It depends. If he's executive producing and he doesn't get involved too much in the day-to-day stuff, maybe it'll be okay. John Constantine, I hope it doesn't focus on him. And the main reason is because I think Matt Ryan has done such a wonderful job on Legends of Tomorrow and the Constantine TV show. That's Constantine in my mind. So to recast that role, I think would be problematic. However, that being said, because it is on HBO Max, they can get away with whatever the hell they want. But you have to find someone who has that same screen charisma. Redoing Swamp Thing, maybe they can resurrect the other guy. I think it was Derek Mears who was Swamp Thing. Am I right or wrong on that one?
Oh, I'm drawing a blank. Sorry. It was really good.
Yeah. So maybe they can bring back that cast and crew, though I doubt it. Zatanna is interesting. She's the magician lady who dresses in fishnets. But she's really cool and her powers function. I think she has to say whatever spell she wants to do, but it has to be said backwards. I'll admit my DC knowledge is rather weak here. Deadman is a cool character. So there is some possibilities because I know there have been, I think there's 2 Justice League Dark movies on DC animated.
Yeah. Both of them are, here's the thing. You're going to get purists that are comic fans that are going to be like, there's something wrong with it. I love both of them. They're really good. And then Matt Ryan's, also his character arc moves completely over to Legends of Tomorrow. So they're all sort of canon, I guess, together.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that Abrams doesn't screw this up. I mean, at least he's not producing the Green Lantern series, which if Greg Berlanti is in charge of that, I think that should be pretty cool. I think that's something to really look kind of forward to. I think if you wanted to do something interesting, and they teased it at the end of Batman v Superman, but we never got to see too much more of it. Do you remember when Joe Manganiello shows up as Deathstroke?
Yeah.
Give me a Deathstroke miniseries with Joe Manganiello.
Well, totally. Here's the thing. Deathstroke is even good. The guy that got the Australian dude to do it in the CW Arrow show was pretty friggin' cool. There's a scene I can send a clip to you, Mike, so you can see from YouTube, where I was like, whoa, like it was last season or the season before, where I was surprised they were able to do it on broadcast TV, where he just goes in and murders people. And it's like, the big fight scene in the Daredevil season 1 on Netflix where he's like fighting everybody in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that, only there's still blood and it's on a broadcast show. This isn't like a premium thing. So I was surprised by that. Then they never really did that again. My guess is they did that. And then somebody at CW is like, standards and practices. What did you do? What did you do to our show that airs at like 8 p.m.?
See, I think there's so many interesting villains. I love Marvel. I like Marvel more than DC, but I think DC has some really interesting villains. Like, hell, if they were to produce a Suicide Squad series, that would be difficult, but not impossible. If you made a bad guy version of Legends of Tomorrow, I'd be all if they made a Legion of
Yeah.
Doom series.
You know
That
what
would
else
be
would be good?
cool.
And it's not DC per se, but King Features owns all those rights. Remember Defenders of the Earth, the cartoon?
Yeah, do that live action.
Yeah, because Lothar, you just like cast anybody that's worked for any CW show that's a big burly black dude, because you got him. You get somewhat famous characters. You could even cast because it's Flash Gordon. They could get the same guy that played the Flash Gordon in the 2007 series, but if that doesn't work, then you get somebody else. Like these are somewhat iconic characters where people that might not know every detail about them know of the characters at least. You got the Phantom, which I'm pretty sure Billy Zane is crying, hoping for work. So
bring him back as the Phantom. That'd be fantastic.
Remember, he campaigned to get that role, and then it killed his career. But that was just bad timing because nobody wanted to see a superhero movie in the mid '90s that wasn't Batman. So because it's them, Mandrake the Magician would be cool to do, and then it's Mandrake the Magician, those three, and then isn't there somebody else other than Lothar?
Yeah, there's Flash Gordon, Lothar, the Phantom, Mandrake.
There's one other person, isn't there?
I want to say there is. I think there's like a girl, but I know there was. I'm thinking back of the cartoon. I'm playing the theme song over
Defenders
in my
of
head.
the Earth.
The Earth. Defenders. Such a cool idea, and I know Defenders of the Earth has like a new comic book series that's come out in the last few years. So I don't know.
Well, at one point, Dynamite or Boom had re-released or started redoing them all because it's King Features, I think, that still owns it all.
Yeah, so I don't know if HBO Max got a hold of those. That'd be pretty cool.
Here we go. Protagonist. Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Mandrake the Magician, Lothar. Then they were the kids. That's what it was.
Yep. Okay, so
but the antagonists were like Ming the Merciless, and then other people from it. But yeah, you could easily with those three, and then just to get it a little extra, you make it Mandrake, Lothar, add a woman character or something so that you get the diverse cast.
You know what show I'd like to see come back?
Here's a question. There's nothing that says like Mandrake is a dude, Lothar's a dude. Nothing that says that you couldn't have a female Flash Gordon or
that'd be awesome.
Or a female Phantom.
Yeah, because the Phantom is just known as the ghost who walks.
Yeah, actually, the easiest one to do without it sounding like an early 2000s remake. It's like, instead of being like it's Flash Gordon's daughter, who's also goes by Flash. They're not going to do that, but the Phantom's the easiest one to do that with because it's just literally the spirit protector of the forest.
Yeah, so that'd be cool. Yeah, I'd be all up for that. I just thought of another series I'd like to see rebooted since you were talking about fantasy adventure television. One show I liked, I think it was called Sheena.
Yeah,
I think I really that show was
the
cool.
chick from Baywatch.
Yeah,
the one that was brought in to replace Pam Anderson.
Yeah, I really liked that one, and I liked the not Land of the Lost, but it was. I remember one of the characters.
Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World ran for 3 seasons.
That show was fucking awesome.
That one, I was also a Beastmaster fan.
Yep, same here.
And the Canadian Sinbad one was good.
The Canadian Sinbad one was underappreciated.
It's because I don't think that one even aired in the States. But there were other ones like from that time period. The last one was actually Sam Raimi's own Legend of the Seeker. That was from 2007 or 2008, something like that. Maybe 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the same style. Ted Raimi played a supporting character because, of course. And it was actually really good. It was the last, as far as I know, the last action syndicated show ever. They haven't done that since where it was made for first run syndication. It sort of died with it because that was right when streaming started to get really big. ABC produced it, but it was sold to international distributors. Both seasons were actually really well done, like better, higher quality than as far as the action and drama goes than like Hercules and all that, because obviously it was 10 years newer. But on top of that, it was also just as funny. So it can be done if you wanted to do that style again, but it would probably be something that shows up on a streaming network first before going to syndication.
I mean, one thing that I think a lot of streaming networks are kind of sleeping on is certain licenses, because obviously HBO Max has its DC license, and they are working on developing that because they have Titans as well, which got better in its second season. First season wasn't very good. But I look at a network like, say, Amazon Prime, and they hold the Jack Ryan license, or as far as I know, Tom Clancy as an umbrella term. And
Well, didn't they just cancel the Jack Ryan show?
I don't know. I hope not, because John Krasinski from The Office is actually a pretty good action hero. I actually really enjoy him as Jack Ryan, and the guy they got playing Wendell Pierce as his partner is really great too. Like, there's a lot of really good chemistry in Jack Ryan. The second season was kind of boring, but it wasn't bad television. It was just boring television. But to expand the world out into the world of Tom Clancy,
they just renewed it for a third season.
Good. Because if they took the umbrella term of Tom Clancy, because it does feature Jack Ryan, they could easily expand it to John Clark. John Clark is the guy who starts up Rainbow Six. Rainbow Six is one of the most popular shooters in the world. That is also one of the most popular games streamed on Twitch. Why not use the synergy and say, hey, watch an episode of Jack Ryan, get an exclusive in-game charm for your Rainbow Six operator, stuff like that. So if they want to increase viewership, sure, it may only be a small fraction, but it doesn't cost Ubisoft anything to really sit down and animate her down for an afternoon. Here, create some weapon charm for a gun. Something like that. But that would open up the Rainbow Six universe, which the Rainbow Six games were fantastic. The Rainbow Six book was actually pretty entertaining and actually deals with a pandemic in the first book, or a virus that gets spread among people because they're testing it on like homeless people, if I remember it right. But
good God.
yeah, it was pretty dark. And I remember reading this in like the early 2000s. But yeah, and that opens up the door to interpret other Tom Clancy properties, because I don't know whether John Clark and Jack Ryan exist in the same universe as Sam Fisher. Sam Fisher being the lead character from Splinter Cell. But it would be neat, if anything, if they took advantage and maybe got Michael Ironside to show up for an episode, even if it's just a voice cameo, and say, oh yeah, that's our operative. We don't know his name, and just, it's Sam Fisher. But that's me pie in the sky. Either way, I hope HBO Max is successful. I don't think we need any more streaming services, because Peacock just showed off some of their stuff. They showed off the first trailer for the Saved by the Bell reboot, and I don't know what to think.
It seems all I got from that was that one character is showing up again, which is at least as a main character, which is what's his name, Slater.
Mario.
And
yeah, Mario.
All he talks about is boning their moms.
Yeah, that's what threw me out of the clip. I was like,
it's like, oh yeah, I was boning your mom, and it's like, and how I got over it was like boning this other chick, and it's, oh well, by the way, that was your mom. Yeah, I was pretty cool boning your moms. I'm like, what?
Yeah, it feels weird. So I guess I'm gonna reserve judgment till I see the first full episode. But party on, I guess. And now Punky Brewster's getting a reboot, and she's a mother too, with the original actress, I think.
Yeah, it's the original actress, but she's aged bad. Like,
yeah, it's not
because she's had work done, and then she's trying to act like she did when she was 12.
No, not a good scene. So we're going to finish up things with some depressing news this week. Not as depressing as getting work done and having it look terrible, but this one should come as no surprise, though people still held out hope for this. So earlier this week, San Diego Comic-Con 2020 has been canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. This is the first time in the con's 50-year history that SDCC has been canceled. The event will instead return to the San Diego Convention Center from July 22nd to the 25th, 2021. WonderCon was also... oh, never mind. That's also been canceled as well. Comic-Con released the following statement Friday regarding their decision to cancel the event. Recognizing the countless attendees save and plan for its conventions each year, and given how many exhibitors and stakeholders rely upon events for a major portion of their livelihood, they had hoped to delay this decision in anticipation that COVID-19 concerns might lessen by summer. Continuous monitoring of health advisories and recent statements by the governor of California had made it clear that it would not be safe to move forward with the plans for this year. SDC also announced the following information: the badge holders, exhibitors, and hotel bookings. Individuals who purchase badges for Comic-Con 2020 will have the option to request a refund or transfer their badges to next year. All 2020 badge holders will receive an email within the next week, blah, blah, blah. Exhibitors for the con will have the same option to transfer their places to next year, or they can get a refund. In the next few days, Comic-Con's hotel affiliate will be canceling all hotel reservations, refunding all deposits. So yeah, hopefully people get their money back, because this is something like I read this article. We didn't cover it on the show when the news broke, but with Comic-Con being canceled, it's going to cost the city of San Diego something like $200 million in lost revenue. And that's hotels, bars, restaurants, and other amenities close to the convention center. So this is a major hit to the economy. But there was no way in hell they were going to let this event happen. Like, Jesus Christ. And to follow up on this, Governor Rick DeSantis, I think is his name, the Florida governor, opened up the fucking beaches this week, but you can't go sunbathing. Yet, if you took a picture of the Daytona Beach camera, those beaches were fucking packed. Yet California is like, nah, man, we're good. We're not going to be stupid like this. We're going to maintain social distancing, maintaining all the orders that we've ordered for shelter at home, and not be stupid.
One of two things will happen here. One, everybody gets sick, and then they try to place the blame on something else. Or two, in this instance, people don't get as sick as they were expecting, and then it cascades and has an effect that fucks over the rest of the country.
Well, yeah, because it's so dumb. And I'd said, like, there are people on my Facebook who have a very vested interest in going to Comic-Con 2020 because they're exhibitors or they're podcasters. And this is where they generate a majority of their content and interviews for the year. And I'm like, guys, you're not going to go. And they're like, why not? I'm like, because do you think the convention's going to risk being a hot zone with people from all around the world being packed in there like sardines for the course of 3 to 4 days, that you're not going to get the virus? Are you nuts? Like, I'm surprised we had PAX this year, considering coronavirus was a concern at the end of February, and PAX still happened. GDC didn't happen because of PAX. Once the writing was on the wall for like Emerald City Comic Con, which got quote unquote postponed, it's not happening this year, folks. The writing was on the wall for this, and people are still I think even Star Wars Celebration said they're not doing it. I'm not 100% sure on that one, but regardless, 2020 is a write-off. You're not going anywhere for a convention. You're not crossing the border for any reason. It's not going to, this year is a write-off, and you people need to get used to it. There are people protesting, end the shutdown. There is one picture, and if this doesn't sum up America in one picture, I don't know what does. It's a woman standing, protesting the lockdown in front of a Baskin fucking Robbins, saying, give me liberty or give me death. Well, I'm going to give you one of the two. You fucking moron. Because if you're not willing to listen to experts in infectious diseases, if you're not willing to listen to medical professionals, and people are going to say, well, my person said that, fucking, it's funny. Fox News, of all people, brought on Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz to have these very terrible talking points which at one point, I think it was Dr. Oz suggested reopening the schools. And I think it was something like, well, there may only be a 2 or 3% mortality rate. And that's something we're just going to have to accept. Now, I read this on Twitter, so take with this what you will. If you look at the census data, the percentage of school kids that would die is something like 2 or a couple million, given the percentage of school-age children in the United States, if we were to do that. Does that not seem positively ghoulish right now? So I'm glad Comic-Con at least had the common sense to avoid becoming another hot zone, because that's what it would have ended up becoming. Anybody who thinks New York City Comic-Con is going to happen in September, October is dreaming at this point. I know up here in Canada, they've canceled events all the way up until July. There's no way Toronto Fan Expo is going to happen. There is no way. They've already canceled Pride. They've canceled the Caribbean Festival, which is pretty big up here. It's just not going to be a good scene, because the logistics of it, of having so many people packed so tightly together, you can't maintain social distancing. You can't maintain that barrier of personal safety with people. It is not going to happen. And I just can't explain to you folks how important it is to flatten the curve. And just because it looks like things are getting better now, that just means what we're doing is working. Keep at it. We're not going to see peak until the summer. Like New York, for example, has like 10,000 or more dead right now, with hundreds of new deaths reported each day. California's numbers are starting to level out. Canada's deaths just crested 1,000. And I know there's talk of reopening the border, and they're like, yep, nope, we're not doing that for at least another month. And I think the border should stay closed for at least another 6 minimum. Because we don't need that cross-contamination. And events like conventions is nothing but cross-contamination, because you don't know who those people have come in contact with, and it spreads geometrically. So, Alex, your thoughts on this?
It's a complicated thing, because you have people that the most compelling argument I've seen is people saying that they're having a really hard time dealing with being isolated or lonely, or things not working the way they used to. And what this is doing, though, is it's bringing up something that most Americans didn't either want to deal with, didn't think existed, or didn't care about before, which is the underlying mental illness that affects Americans. They don't have health support. They have a terrible healthcare system. And no matter how many Americans for years have been saying America's the best, everything's the best here. Well, the richest people in the world can afford the best healthcare. Everybody else gets fucked. And that's just how it is. Because in the States, the right to health and life is not a given right. You don't have the right to live in the States. You have the right to freedom, which is very different from every other first world country ever. I'm sorry. It just is. So you have underlying health issues like depression and all this, and it brings up like the gun control thing. It's not about gun control. It's about people control. And the problem with the Americans they're very, on average, very mentally ill when it comes to depression and anxiety and issues, because they don't have the means to talk about it or get through it, because they don't have health care. They just don't. Dealing with mental health is not a thing in the States except for rich people.
Well, it's also been so stigmatized that if you have a problem, just tough it out and don't talk about it. It's
either just tough it out or don't talk about it, but also it's, oh my God, I can't afford to go see a therapist or psychologist. I can't do that because how am I going to pay for my bills? So now they're in a situation where not only can they not pay their bills, they're having to deal with their own anxiety and issues they've never dealt with before. And some people are lashing out saying it's the government's fault for keeping everything closed and things have to go back to normal. The American normal was failing them and they didn't even know it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And this is one of the big things I've been hoping for. Now, things are getting different, and we're going to talk about this in our weird news segment when it comes to stimulus. This is a chance for things to be rebuilt. Things are not going to go back to the way they were. There is talk of universal basic income. There is talk of changing the system, such as it may be. The system as we know it, or at least this is my opinion, and some of you are going to label me a dirty communist, and I'm okay with that. The system doesn't work. It works for the 1%. Trickle-down economies have never worked. The 1% get richer, 99% of us suffer. There's a chance for us to level the playing field. There was a guy, a fairly rich guy, went on MSNBC or CNN, one of the big mainstream media networks recently. He says, you know what? To hell with the hedge fund managers. Let their portfolios burn. If that means they don't get the summer in the Hamptons, then so fucking be it. And the guy was aghast that he would say that on air. He's like, we need to save Main Street, not Wall Street.
Because here's the problem, and it sounds like everybody that talks like us, they always get painted and labeled as you're socialists and you're this and that, and it's like, no, there's nuance to everything. We're not communists, we're not this and that. But what it comes down to is America is founded upon greed, and it has been for since World War II. It's been greed. Pure and simple greed. The American dream is how much can I get and who gives a fuck about anybody else because I'm getting mine.
Well,
and
it's funny because
it's been worse since the 80s more than anything.
After the Second World War, for a period of about 10 to 15 years, it was helping rebuild things at home. There was a real humanitarian feel to it. But you're right, as time went on, it became more and more greedy. And it became, when did inhumanity become the new in thing? And you're right, especially since the 1980s, things have gotten progressively worse since the baby boomers became fully functioning adults and have kids of their own.
In regular corporate America, and there's newer tech companies and newer startups that have gone more the route of, hey, let's work till we're comfortable sort of thing. But for the vast majority of multi-generational Americans now, there is no concept of enough is enough. Like, when do I have enough? Well, why would I have enough? I need to make more. Why do you need to make more? There is a point where it doesn't matter what money you have. You can't live a better life.
Yeah, like I don't get the need to have so much. Fuck my microphone. I don't understand the need to have so much that you're just hoarding. You're like a dragon hoarding coins on a mountain. It doesn't help you. Sure, it'll make you live more comfortable, but it's not fulfilling you. Like, it's really strange just to watch all this and to know people in our age range, unless you are remarkably fortunate, you're never going to retire. You're going to work until you're dead.
And what's amazing to me is when you have that divide where people our age or younger that still believe in the old American dream the way it always was. And it's like, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. You're going to make other people suffer. And then we're not saying spread the wealth. It's not that. It's, does anybody in the world need to make more than $200,000 a year to live off of and live comfortably? No. So there's no reason for somebody who does the least amount of work in a company with a CEO in most cases to be making millions of dollars per year and then still expect a bonus.
Yeah, like one example that people gave, and this comes back to a story, I don't know whether we covered it or if we cut it in our coronavirus scything of news. Jeff Bezos started up a fund, and Jeff Bezos, for those of you that don't understand, is he's the Amazon guy, and he started a relief fund where he donated $25 million. Jeff Bezos is the richest man on earth, worth billions upon billions. He could give I forget the exact figures, but it came down to he could give them all a comfortable living wage to pay them for their time, their risk, and everything else he could do above and beyond, and he'd still be left with $80 billion.
Basically, well, there was a point where he could pay out pretty much every American enough to live through this issue and still live 10 lifetimes with the money he has.
Yeah, like, I know it's my money and I worked hard for it and blah, 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 but...
Like, here's the question. Whatever happened to growing up and being told it's better to share than it is to be greedy? It's like you're told that when you're 5, and then by the time you're 16, 17, you're told, no, fuck that. You should be getting what's yours. And they're coming around to it. You're seeing it happening more and more now in the different states that are really hit hard. They're like, oh shit, they are crowdfunding. They're doing things to help each other. And it's not like we're trying to be down on it. Like, they need to do these sorts of things. But what I've noticed is not a single person on the news in the States is saying, why aren't we looking to what other countries have done to help this? It's like they're terrified. They're fixated on one thing only, and that's either you love Trump or you hate Trump. That's all they talk about at all. Why doesn't somebody just go, hey, look at Canada. Right now in Canada, there's 14 million people in Ontario. There's 19 million people in New York, which borders us, right? Mm-hmm. New York has 34 times the amount of cases we have of coronavirus. They only have, we have 66% of their population, and they have 34 times the amount of cases.
Yeah, I think Ontario's death toll, the last I looked, I think it was under 700.
It's under 700. I was looking at the stats for it, and that was the big, huge one for me. Was I could not believe just, and they're saying that they're thinking of reopening borders between the countries because they need trade. Well, they can open the border on their end. We're not going to let anybody in.
No, because actually one of the biggest supporters for Trump, Doug Ford, our Ontario premier, said, we don't want them here. No, we are not doing this. And he said a few weeks ago when Trump took those N95 masks or something along those lines, he said, well, when the chips are down, you really see who your friends are. Well,
here's the exact stats. This is as of this week. So Ontario shares a border with Michigan and New York State. Population, we got 14.5 million here. Michigan has about 10 million, and there's about almost 20 million in New York. There's 9,500 confirmed cases in Ontario, 226,000 in New York State, 30,000 in Michigan. Now, Michigan has 2/3 of our population, and they have 3 times the cases. New York State has 30% more population than us, and they are in the 10 to 20 times. We have less than 500 or 600 or so deceased. Michigan has nearly 2,100. New York State has 16,000. So it's ridiculous, and not to mention, New York has run 5 times as many tests as we have. So the test correlation isn't helping them. Running the tests on people aren't helping the fact that they're still dying because they're not following protocols.
Yeah.
And then you go BC. There's 5 million people. They border Washington. 7 million people. There's again 10 times the amount of deaths in Washington. The only one that's more is Alberta because they border Montana, and there's fuck all people in Montana. But if you look at one of the other major ones, our biggest problem has been Quebec, which was they have the most deaths and all that, but it still pales in comparison to everybody that they border. And really interesting one is New Brunswick borders Maine. They have about half the population of Maine. Maine has 7 times the cases. And Maine's only had 27 deaths, but New Brunswick's had 0. So everywhere that we border, with the exception of Alberta, because Alberta borders a state that has 1/7 of its population, it shows that not only do the social distancing measures that we've taken work dramatically better, and we are people think that Canada is super spread apart. our populations are pocketed really tightly together.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been, for the most part, and not fine, people are still dying. It sounds bad, but in comparison, when New York has 34 times the deaths that we have, and New York and Toronto are similar in their metropolitan makeups, and then you've got, take that into account, and then take into account the fact that our actual free healthcare system works. Yes, they're strained. Yes, they have it. But you know what? For all the talk that Americans have said about how bad our system is because of the wait times, it's worse in the States than it is here.
Yep.
So it's not us trying to be talking on our high horse, but like we feel bad because we got a lot of friends in the States.
Absolutely.
And I feel terrified what's going on with them. And I'm more upset that they're not thinking of doing any drastic changes, because right now you see all these people going on there, and there's entire political movements to just let the herd mentality go and let people die so that the rest of them will be stronger. What the fuck kind of mentality is that? That's the American dream? Let the weak die?
Yeah, I don't agree with it. And we have friends in some of these states that are vastly affected. Like, we have our friends in Michigan. We have our friends in New York. We have a lot of friends in California.
And you got friends in Texas.
Texas. Yeah, I'm worried. And to think people want to restart these things, they want to talk about major sporting events next. And that's the next thing they're going to talk about too. Because WWE is somehow an essential business. And that's not a story we were going to cover this week, but we'll just talk about it very, very, very briefly.
It's essential to Vince McMahon's greed. That's the only thing it's essential to.
Yeah, and that kind of is a good lead-in point. So just before we break into the weird news, Florida Governor Rick DeSantis deemed WWE an essential business during lockdown for whatever reason. And funny how he got named to Trump's advisory committee on reopening the economy, which we're going to talk about in the weird news. But before we do, we're going to take a break here on TWIG because this got real depressing real fast. We're going to take a break with Mahoney and Company and go visit the police academy, some of which were filmed in Toronto. So we'll be back, guys, right after this, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Just a quick review here from our friends at La La Land Records. I have Police Academy, the original motion picture score on CD. This is a remastered set. It is pretty much every bit of music used in the first film on one CD. A lot of it is incidental music. A lot of it is sort of background. There is a total of 29 tracks, including one of them is a bonus track, with a runtime of about 45 minutes or so. There's 3,000 units here that are limited to this edition that you can order from their website. Overall, it's pretty cool that it comes with a decent booklet here. And I'm just going to go sort of through it because it has pictures from this, like the set, as well as iconic scenes, and explains how the movie was made, how it was scored, as well as giving you a full list of the orchestra involved with it. It's pretty cool. I like that they gave that with the jewel case. Music-wise, it sounds fantastic. They've done a really good job of remastering it. High fidelity, really good dynamic range. If you're a fan of that sort of 80s style of cop movie that has those horns and just that sort of iconic cop sound from the 70s and 80s, it's a pretty cool soundtrack to hear. As far as comparing it to the actual film, I went and watched the Blu-ray that I have of the first movie, and I can tell that you can hear a lot more in the CD than you can in that mix. So they've done a pretty good job going back to the master tapes and making sure that it sounds great. It is retailing, varies in price, but I'll put a link to their website so you can check it out right there and purchase it direct. But overall, it's pretty cool. It's not one of those CDs that you're going to be playing non-stop as far as listenability for like long tracks. Because remember, it's 28 tracks or so with the one bonus. clocking in at 45 minutes. So these are, in the range of, some of them are 40 seconds, some of them are a couple minutes, but it is really cool to hear, and it, honestly makes good for background music when it comes to something when you're trying to concentrate or do some extra work. So it's kind of neat. Just a little quick review. I figured I'd pop in here because it is one of my favorite movies from the 80s, and it is nice to see that there is a really high quality soundtrack available for it.
What makes you qualified to be a reporter?
I'm willing to violate anyone's privacy for my personal gain and then claim with a straight face that the public has a right to know.
By the hand of Zeus, what manner of deviltry is this?
I love fake alien poop day.
And welcome back to TWIG, such as it may be. We are talking about the weird, strange, and unusual things that happened on virus-stricken Earth this week. No, it's not a parallel dimension like in Sliders. This is our unfortunate reality, and I'm here with you to bring you all this. And so is Alex. So, let's start things off with surely a sign of the end of the world. U.S. President Donald Trump has named Vince McMahon in an advisory group to help reopen the United States economy. The U.S. president announced this week he's putting together a group including the commissioners of the nation's top 4 sports leagues and other executives. As well as the great WWE chairman Vince McMahon, Trump also named the likes of the NBA's Adam Silver, NFL chief Roger Goodell, MLB's Rob Manfred, and NHL boss Gary Bettman. Furthermore, he noted UFC president Dana White is also part of the team, alongside Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. Speaking during a briefing on Tuesday, Trump talked about the importance of bringing sports back into everyday life after the coronavirus pandemic forced leagues to halt play. He said, "We have to get our sports back. I'm tired of watching baseball games that are 14 years old." I actually haven't had too much time to watch. I would say maybe I watch one batter, then I get back to work. The conference call came after it was revealed WWE would be allowed to continue to hold live shows without a crowd at the Performance Center in Orlando. Despite being under a stay-at-home order, the company has also deemed it an essential business and so will be able to broadcast from its training facility each week. Speaking to the media earlier this week, Orange County Mayor Jerry Deming said, "I think there was a review that was done and they were initially deemed an essential business. With some conversation with the governor's office regarding the governor's order, they were deemed an essential business. And so therefore they were allowed to remain open." The classification as an essential business amid Florida's stay-at-home mandate comes from a memo issued by the state coordinating officer, I can't pronounce this guy's last name, but listing those classified as such. The memo states employees at a professional sports and media production with a national audience, including any athletes, entertainers, production team, executive, media, and others necessary to facilitate, including services such as supporting production, only if the location is closed to the general public. Get fucked. Somebody walked up with a suitcase full of money. Vince McMahon doing his Vince McMahon walk says, "Look here."
He's bribed police officers to get people off of murder in the past. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, this is such horse shit.
If you guys were to go and watch Dark Side of the Ring about Jimmy Superfly Snuka, yeah, it basically shows that Vince McMahon he bribed a bunch of local police officers to look the other way when he was arraigned on murder charges years ago, to the point where had he not died of dementia last year or the year before, the trial would have gone on again. Now that they found new evidence, and they would have proven that there was corruption with the police, because Vince walked in with a briefcase full of money and walked out with Superfly Snuka. So that tells you everything you need to know about any morals he has.
Yeah, and it's fucked up because it's funny. WWE lists its essential business and then a couple of days later lays off a whole shit ton of people. So they furloughed a bunch of other WWE people, like production staff, etc. but they let go a bunch of talent, and now they're holding Money at the Bank at their Connecticut headquarters with the briefcases on the roof now, so they have to make it from the bottom floor WWE headquarters to the roof. Jesus Christ, this story keeps getting stupider by the fucking day. Like, really? And then Dana White, the guy who's in charge of UFC, said he's going to hold the next UFC event no matter what. So people were jokingly online saying, what, is UFC going to hold it in like international waters like Fire Festival? There's going to be like UFC Fight Island. So it's essentially Mortal Kombat now.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Like, just Jesus Christ. Like, Vince McMahon. Honestly, if he was the president of the United States, it might make a little bit more sense. But Trump is just picking, like, the stupidest people for this. And,
yeah,
like, sports, I'm sorry. The people who clean the garbage, who man the concession stands, who take your tickets, who do the security, who do the parking, they're the people who need to be worried about their jobs and job security, not the assholes who run around the bases for like a couple hours a week. I'm sorry you don't get to play your millionaires game with your buddies. I'm really sorry. And yes, I know you've worked hard. I recognize that you're an athlete, but you are, for all intents and purposes, different from everybody else because you are an athlete. It's about the common person now, and you need to care more about the common people. The common people can be entertained via Netflix, movies, or books. You have this wonderful resource called a library, and you can access those digitally now. So don't give me that bullshit. Well, I can't go to the library. No, motherfucker, you still can. Or get an Audible subscription or something. Like, it blows my mind just how much they want sports to come back. There was talk. My roommate Shannon brought this up to me. I didn't believe her at first until I started reading about it. They want baseball to come back with closed stadiums, but the batters and the umpire have to stand so many feet apart. Like, then what's the fucking point? If it's going to radically change how the game is played, fuck off. Like, you get a year off. Take your millions of dollars you made last year. I'm sorry you don't get to buy another mansion in the Hollywood Hills and chill out. Maybe spend some time with that family that you have.
Yeah.
Like, it infuriates me with this obsession with sports. Hell, one sport that has adapted to all this fairly well, surprisingly, is NASCAR. NASCAR is holding their races on Twitch. They're giving drivers rigs, which are essentially like streaming rigs meant for computer games, putting all the fancy switches and car things. So it's like Alex, you went to some press conferences with me, and you've seen those really fancy driving cars.
Oh yeah, dude, yeah, and not to mention, like, there's certain industries that have been adapting really well to this. And surprisingly, it's like F1 and NASCAR and racing has been the easiest ones to transition, because for people that have like home rigs, just like the flight sim people, like, you can get like $600-700 worth of hardware that basically makes it like you're in an actual car, and that's what most of these people have.
Yeah, and they're streaming on Twitch, and they're talking, they're joking, people are enjoying it. People have said online the races look pretty good, and they actually have actual banter between commentators, and it sounds like a real race. If you didn't know you were looking at a video game at a glance, you might not even know. So that's the power of the media we have access to, and we're going to have to tap in the virtual entertainment for the next little bit. And if being not entertained is the worst crime in the world right now, I think you'll fucking survive. So moving on to my next, hopefully less depressing story, because I'm reading these in no particular order today. Nope. It's going to be equally as stupid, because why wouldn't it be? So courtesy of the NewYorkPost.com, stimulus checks are being spent on dildos, tigers, guns, and stripper poles. So according to this article, Stimulus checks are funding a national pandemic of impulse buys. Americans began receiving the first batch of coronavirus relief funds this week, and now many are taking to social media to brag about the assortment of purchases, both strange and savvy they've already made with them. While many are using the emergency cash to pay bills for necessities and living expenses, others are putting the money toward wild splurges. Among the more trivial items that have reportedly been used the extra bucks on is an inflatable dinosaur costume. Although the buyer argues the $35 getup was totally worth it, I actually have a good use for it. Plus, look at that price. I bought two. The proud dinosaur suit owner tweets. Fuck it. I'm buying a stripper pole with my stimulus check. We have to invest in our future, tweets a future exotic dancer. Some jokingly plan to team up so they can use their economic impact payments to buy a baby tiger. Hear me out. Who wants to combine their stimulus checks with me so we can buy a tiger, writes one likely fan of Tiger King. It's hard to argue a canopied bed is ever essential, but one mom bought a princess-themed one for her kid. The same argument goes for a woman who used her stimulus check to buy a high-end sex toy, although she concedes she bought the stimulator only after paying off her credit card. Stimulus check came this morning, and I immediately paid off my credit card and bought my first toy. Just trying to orgasm by 25. One hobbyist burning through their stimulus check indulged in paintball equipment, while another caved and brought a pricey pair of Yeezy shoes. At least one entire stimulus check and probably additional cash went towards buying Bird One's e-scooter, which retails for about $1,299. Others are considering purchasing more personalized items from insight from celebrities, thinking about buying myself a cameo from Big Ed with the stimulus check, writes a fan of reality show star Ed Brown. Another early check recipient spent her cash on a warm and cozy coat, which, while arguably an essential buy, might be out of season. Some option for more practical decisions, choosing pragmatism over indulgences. One woman already spent her entire check on her electric bill, car payment, and a credit card bill, with enough left over to buy tank tops and a bidet. And just like that, it's gone, she tweets. Another woman treated herself to 2 Walmart stuffed animals after paying her water and electric bill. Media worker Ryan Cole put his check towards paying off Sally Mae like a boss. Put that stimulus check to good use, he tweets with a screenshot of his payment confirmation. One woman chose to put part of her check back into the stock market and some of her savings for a savvy investment. After she jokingly said she spent her money on a house, a Good Samaritan revealed she and her boyfriend had actually both donated their checks to Feeding America. Others are still in the planning stages for what they plan to do with their money. Looking forward to using my stimulus check to purchase another AR-15 and some 30-round mags, writes one gun rover. For those without direct deposit, checks may not arrive until mid-August or later. You can check the status of yours and even speed up the dough, blah, 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 blah. It's $1,200, and as far as I understand, it's maybe a 1 or 2 time payment. I'm not 100% sure. It's not forever. Like up here in Canada, you get $2,000 a month for the next 4 months. My guess is that will be extended sometime during summer parliament, because at this point, it has to. And Wiley is singing, and I don't know why. So I don't know whether you could hear that. Can you, Alex?
I can briefly. I might be able to boost it in post.
It's kind of funny. Why is this going? Row, row? Wiley, are you okay, buddy? Daddy's trying to talk to people. Now he shuts up. Anyway, I have no problem with some people spending a little bit of it. Like that one woman who bought some tank tops and a bidet. That's smart. She paid off all her bills. That's cool. For example, if you wanted to pay off a majority of your bills and you wanted to buy, say, a Nintendo Switch because it will kill time for you, that's okay. Just be smart with your money. Don't be stupid. And I guess that's what it comes down to, because I'm a part of a Facebook group, and it's a fairly significant one. It's like 35,000 members, and I'm pretty active in there. And I see some people spending their stimulus money really fucking dumb. Because if we're all worried about rent and everything, and certain people don't qualify for stimulus if they're students or whatever else, there's all these things where if you didn't make this much money, you don't qualify, blah, 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 blah. And if you're blowing your money on really stupid shit, like, I'm sorry, you don't need another gun right now. You don't need... Well, it's funny. You mentioned sex toys are not an essential item, but hey, let's be honest.
They're not essential in that they
don't help you live. They don't.
For instance, Amazon should not be prioritizing them, which they are. If you want to get a sex toy, you should be ordering it from a sex toy company. You don't.
Yeah.
Amazon should be. You shouldn't be complaining that your sex toy didn't arrive fast enough because Amazon is going to try to prioritize things like grains, rice, food, essentials like toilet paper. I'm sorry, your sex toy is not essential. It may be helpful to your mental well-being and sexual well-being, but it is not essential to live.
Yeah, like it's so weird just to see these people. Like, your government just did something fairly out of character for it. It should have just let you die, frankly. If it was up to the government in charge, they would have just let you die. But that's not American. So I don't know, people. What are you spending your stimulus checks on? I'd really love to hear it. So feedback at ThisWeekInGeek.net or Twitter us at ThisWeekInGeek. I hope you're spending it well. Be it on bills and other essentials, rent, which that's another conversation to have too, because certain landlords are acting really fucking entitled during this. Which some landlords up in Canada have said, you know what, things are tough right now. We get that. Don't worry about rent. You got to feed your family first. Some rental companies have really come through, and some smaller landlords have really come through too. Because they're thinking
long term. In the states, they're like, "Hey, you pay or you're evicted," or there's this skeevy things you're hearing about them saying, "Well, if you can't pay your rent for women, come over and suck my dick, and then maybe we'll talk about extending your rent payment times." And it's like, what the fuck? And you're finding out that's happening a lot, like way more than you would expect.
Yeah, that was a story we actually didn't cover this week, but in Hawaii, reports of that are actually going up right now, where landlords are exchanging sexual favors. That's essentially rape or extortion. Yeah. And no matter how you say it, it's creepy and disgusting.
Yeah, and anybody that wants to argue otherwise needs to have their head reevaluated. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You're a creep. You're disgusting. Don't come on my show.
Yeah, that's what, if you're saying, well, what if it's them offering it? It doesn't matter if that's what's over. If you're offering your dignity and body because they're so greedy that they're going to put you homeless in a national crisis, think about this. They're not thinking long term. Oh, they're not paying, kick them out. Who the fuck are you going to get to pay the rent on the rest of your building? Nobody has money to move in.
Yeah.
So if you kick everybody out in the street, one, nobody's working, nobody has a home to live in, the homes become derelict, people stop paying their electrical bills. You've got all these owners that are now going to be stuck with these empty buildings that are worth nothing. So up in Canada and other smart places, they're doing things like saying, okay, let's do a payment plan. Can you pay $200 now, or can you pay $200 a week, to pay off your rent? And then you'll have a balance later on, and we'll work out a payment plan later. Some of the buildings where they're using it as like a write-off. They're like, okay, you know what? This month is a write-off. We're going to write off this 1 month, give you a grace period, make sure you have your rent for next month.
Yeah, like there are good companies that are doing things about it. Not every rental places. There is no rent freeze in Canada, but I know places like in France, they've done stuff like this.
Yeah, there's European countries in the European Union. They're like, by the way, not only is it a rent freeze, nobody can charge rent for anything. They're basically putting a halt on their entire economy on that. And here's the thing, if nobody has to pay it, and then the landlords are being told they don't have to pay land taxes or anything either right now. So they're basically saying, all right, everything's on hold. And, that's actually a better way to do it than just like willy-nilly. They're like, okay, so now if nobody has to pay, then nobody incurs debt, not even the owners.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, there are ways to do this right and humanely, because ultimately life isn't about the bottom line. And I don't know where the message got lost along the way. And I know we're going on a really hard left leaning.
For right now, it's really exposed a lot of cracks and problems.
Inequities.
And one much is that just problems in how the society works in general that aren't going to be magically fixed with a Band-Aid. So, and that's just our opinion on that. But at the same time, Canada is going to move on fairly normal from now on. People will be more conscious. It'll be normal to see people, once all this clears up, to see people wearing masks. They're going to have to do things like in movie theaters. Don't be surprised if they only sell every other seat from now on forever, to give you a couple spaces between people, and there won't be people going out as much. There's going to have to be some changes that way, but you're also going to see, not just in university cities where you had a lot of international students, pretty much everywhere people are going to be wearing masks probably for the rest of their lives out of fear. And out of
this is
just general thing. It's going to be like it is in Asia.
Yeah, this is going to change the social fabric for quite some time until an effective vaccine is developed and given.
But that's just for this one. There's nothing to stop the next one from coming now that it's happened. It'll cascade. Because shutting down a couple markets in China isn't going to stop this sort of thing from happening in the really overpopulated third world countries. It's just not going to stop it. It's just that this is the first time that one of the doomsday ones hit. And anybody that's saying, "Oh, it's only affecting old people," it's not. If they did nothing, if we had not, done the social distancing stuff, if we had not shut down the borders, if we had just let business run as usual and let it kill off the old people, we'd be in a situation now where we'd have multiple millions of dead.
Yeah. I hope things will change. We'll wait and see what happens, but I hate to say it, I'm not optimistic. So let's move on to our final story, and you can tell we're beating this horse into the ground, but this was too good to pass up simply because of the source. So Yahoo.com, which I would consider a fairly reliable news source, posted this article this past week, and it reads as follows. Trumpists believe that Bill Gates is using the coronavirus to implant brain chips. Let that sink in for a moment. So billionaire Bill Gates and his wife Melinda have committed $100 million of their own money to fight the coronavirus pandemic. In return, a fevered segment of the pro-Trump interest is convinced that the couple wants to kill off a good portion of humanity, then install the mark of the beast-style tracking chips in whoever survives. On Wednesday...
Sorry.
I know, I can hardly read this without cracking up. On Wednesday, pro-Trump personalities and regular Trump White House guests Diamond and Silk became the latest to push the conspiracy theories about Gates, tweeting that Microsoft founder was operating on a secretive agenda to quote-unquote rule the world with vaccines, and vowing not to take any coronavirus vaccine that Gates was involved with. You're not going to make black people the guinea pigs for this here, right here, said Lynette Diamond Hardaway, said in a video. We're not going to be your experiment or your project, said Rochelle Silk Richardson. Diamond and Silk, who visited the White House on several occasions, have been featured as campaign surrogates and have boosted by Trump aren't alone. Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson claimed last week that Gates wants to use vaccines to track people, while Fox News host Laura Ingraham, who has met with Trump to discuss the coronavirus, tweeted that Gates and other globalists want to use the crisis to track people. Gates' name has appeared on protest signs meant to criticize Ohio's social distancing order, while former Trump advisor Roger Stone accused Gates of wanting to microchip people. Amid the confusion caused by the coronavirus pandemic, Gates has emerged in fringe right circles as a villain behind the virus's spread. Gates has been long been viewed suspiciously as by vaccine skeptics who take out of context remarks he made in 2011 about vaccines as proof he wants to use inoculations to reduce the global population. In reality, Gates meant that reducing child mortality would help parents plan their families better. In the coronavirus era, though rumors and conspiracy theories about Gates have boomed, on social media, Gates has been wrongly accused of everything from plotting the coronavirus pandemic ahead of time to distributing plush souvenir coronavirus toys to celebrate the virus's death toll. Gates has taken on the mastermind in the right-wing conspiracy imagination typically reserved for billionaire Democratic donor George Soros, according to Brooke Banowski, the managing editor of the fact-checking website Truth or Fiction. These are just all recirculated, warmed-over stories. They're just switching the names around, says Banowski. George Soros was the boogeyman. Now it's Bill Gates. The disinformation campaign about Gates kicked off early in the spread of COVID-19, and the QAnon conspiracy theorists claimed he had somehow patented the virus, with the implication that Gates was deliberately spreading the disease. More recently, conspiracy theorists claim Gates is somehow developing a tracking device to pair with any coronavirus vaccine. Some right-wing figures have even claimed Gates is developing the mark of the beast as predicted in the Book of Revelations. In fact, Gates' foundation funded research in 2016 into using invisible ink to track child vaccinations in developing countries long before the coronavirus pandemic. As for the coronavirus, Gates has pledged to fund the construction of 7 different factories to help with production of 7 potential vaccines. The investment will cost him billions because, in all likelihood, much of the money will go to waste. But he's argued that it is worth it since it will dramatically reduce the time to scale up manufacturing as vaccine trial runs are conducted. There's a lot more to read, but people are fucking stupid. Bill Gates is not trying to kill us.
What purpose does he have to do so?
I don't know, because he's a global elitist or whatever the hell that means. Like, anybody I've ever met who takes any of these right-wing conspiracies seriously has turned out to be a loon. Like, a loon or an asshole. Is there some sinister... I mean, has Bill Gates done some shady shit in the past? Yeah, maybe.
It's honestly a mental health thing. There are people that... It's not just... Like, people say, oh, they're dumb. It's not necessarily just a dumb thing. There are people that have undiagnosed, like, schizophrenia, or they have dissociative things, or they're like, I feel so lonely, I have to belong to a cause. And these people are my people now because they'll believe me. So I'll believe any conspiracy theory out there as long as it makes me feel like I'm part of a group.
Like, and they're just, it's like that meme where you show the guy and the cork board and the thumbtacks and he's putting all the different things together. That's what this makes me think of. Like, you're putting together really out of context things and just, it's so weird. And I doubt the world is as sinister as people think it is. Yes, the world has done some horrible things in the past. I'm not saying it's all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns, because it's not. But I'm also not saying the apocalypse is lurking around the corner. I'm not saying the devil himself walks among us. I'm not seeing Randall Flagg yet. This isn't Stephen King's The Stand. Although Stephen King's taken this in stride, I will say that. He's like, you think you're all living a novel now? But I don't know. It's just, it blows my mind. Bill Gates created the coronavirus to give us the mark of the beast. Please open Fuddruckers.
Because of course.
Yeah, because that's how it works. In fact, there is one tweet that I posted about this, and it kind of ties into all this. Kind of the theme of this show, if you will, has been coronavirus. What the fuck are you doing to intelligence? And it was posted by Patton Oswald last night, and I want to mention it here. He said, and I quote, when you talk about the coronavirus just how stupid it is, and how people want to open the borders, end the lockdown. Bill Gates is evil. And he said, Anne Frank spent 2 years hiding in an attic, and we've been home for just over a month with Netflix, food delivery, video games, and there are people risking viral death by storming state capitol buildings and screaming open Fuddruckers. Does that not just
because the American
sum up
dream
America?
is how much money can I make and how much freedom can I have? It doesn't matter if it hurts me or other people. It's literally, it's a freedom thing. They feel like I should have the freedom to kill myself and everybody around me, because what it means to be American is I should have freedom for everything. I have liberty or death.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work like that. And especially, like, I don't know. Like, I think back on the whole Bill Gates thing, and you're allowed to believe whatever you want to believe. If you have all the information available to you and this is what you honestly think, you are entitled to that opinion until it becomes dangerous. And I have a feeling the more dangerous opinions are popping up day by day by day, and with the certain segments of the population downplaying data, it hasn't been good. And there's been accusations that WHO hasn't been entirely transparent either. And I'm willing to believe some of that maybe some of the numbers coming out of China were inaccurate, because honestly, that just seems like it makes sense. And that's okay. There is mistakes on every side. I don't think the virus could have been prevented, but I think we could have maybe caught it sooner. But a bad death toll was always going to happen because we weren't willing to lock things down, because it interfered with our way of life. And that's really unfortunate. However, companies and countries that have really stepped up to the plate and done what they could for people have really shown us the curve can be flattened, lives can be saved, and our stakeholders and our shareholders are willing to let that go. Not every company, not every person needs to be a greedy, excessive asshole. Not every person out there is me. You have people doing the common good. And in fact, one of the most heartwarming things I've seen come out of this, and it didn't last for too long, it may still happen now. Even my wife tried to do this, and I don't think I've shared this story before. But early on in the viral pandemic, every night at 7:00, people would go to their doors and bang a pan or a cowbell, make noise. And that was meant to be for our frontline workers. And that's everybody from your fast food worker who's preparing your food now more so than ever, to the grocery store clerk who you look down at because they didn't scan your coupon right, to the doctors and nurses and the personal support workers who do this job without as much protective equipment as they need every day. And it feels good to know that there are support. And even, I think this was a recent story in Canada. Canada Post drove by hospitals in their mail delivery vehicles with their horns honking to show support for the doctors, nurses, and personal support workers, etc., who are all frontline during all this. And my wife did it. She made noise at 7:00 for one night. She was the only one doing it, unfortunately, because we live near the outskirts of our city. So there might have been more downtown, but I know in Kitchener it was fairly significant because they showed it on the 6:00 news. You've seen bands coming together to do it. Celebrities are coming together. Like Ryan Reynolds has donated a shit ton of money and supplies. Like one of his friends is like a nurse, and he donated a bunch of N95 masks and some other shit. Television shows have donated if they have like a bunch of if they're like a medical show like Grey's Anatomy or The Resident or something, they've donated all their medical supplies and equipment so they can have them on the front lines. So there are some good feel good stories to come out of all of this. We're seeing one of the most heartbreaking things I saw yesterday, I saw this on CTV National News for babies that are born right now. They're giving them little face shields. And a child's first moments of life should not be spent behind plastic. But if that meant that baby's going to live and be protected, then yeah, it absolutely should, because we are in vastly uncertain times right now. And I can't tell you where it's going to end up. What I can tell you is this. We stand at a precipice, at a moment in time where things can change for the better, or they can change for the worse. We can choose a different direction. We can choose a better path forward if we're willing to let go of some old ideals that are rooted in the past, ones that have been rooted in humanity for a very, very long time. The ones of fuck you, I've got mine, I'm better than you, I'm climbing higher on this ladder because X. If we are willing to work together, cooperatively, if we are willing to be humane to each other, then things can change. Because nobody deserves to live in poverty. No one should live in fear of an invisible killer. Nobody should be forced to live an indignant life. Like one of the inequities that's being pointed out right now is people on disability survive on just a little over $1,100 a month. And the government is giving people $2,000 a month. Do you see that problem?
Yeah, and the argument I've seen back is, well, they've already been living off of that, so it's fine. No,
yeah.
The problem is people that are on disability that can't work have been living in utter poverty for 20 years or more.
Yeah, and it's just fine because we're considered subhuman.
Yet literally, if you worked a minimum 8 hours a week, you're entitled to $2,000.
Yeah. So what I'm saying here, folks, is if you really want to change things, you got to write to your MPPs, your MPs, your governors, your state representatives, whatever the equivalent is in the European Union, Australia, Asia, whatever. You got to keep up the pressure. Things can change, and I firmly believe that. I think right now we have a real turning point in history. Like, this is unlike anything we've seen in like decades, if at all. I mean, people will bring up the comparison to N1N1 or H1N1 and the swine flu, and that killed a lot of people too, but it didn't shut down the economy. This is more virulent, and look at what it's done. So shut the fuck up. It's clearly dangerous. But this is pointed out, there's so many cracks and flaws in our system that maybe it's time to change what wasn't working. And you don't have to say, oh, it's socialism. Socialism's bad. No, you've been programmed to think that. It's not evil to think well and to think more of your fellow man. Just because someone has less than you doesn't mean they are a lesser person. And I know I just talked about this. Sorry, some millionaires don't get to play ball this year. I feel for them too. They're people too. And I want them to have opportunities as well. But I want the majority, the common people, to have a level playing field. And I don't think that's a horrible thing right now. And I think that's one thing we can do. There are more of us than there are of the 1%. And I think united, we can do something. And I think united, we can have a better world for everybody involved. Because social distancing isn't going away for a while, but the systems that help create the governments that we live in, the social economies that we live in, can be better. And we talked about this off air, me and Alex, and I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but it was something like the people exist to serve the economy. No. The economy exists to serve us. And any talk of reopening economies right now is kind of ghoulish. We should be focused on surviving right now, getting through day to day. I don't need to know where I'm getting my next movie. I don't need to know where I'm going to find my next issue of People magazine or something. I need to know, when am I going to eat? Is there going to be a roof over my head? Are my friends and family going to be safe? And I'm willing to work towards that future for everybody, no matter what social stratus they come from, if you are. And I think that's an important message to take away from all this. And what about you, Alex? What are your thoughts on this?
Very similar. Like, I won't go into it because it sounds like we've been beating a dead horse over all this.
Yeah.
This was not intended to be the coronavirus talking down at episode. It's just sort of, we have to get it all out now, because if we don't, it's going to linger on.
Yeah.
So overall, like, everything you said, as well as just just use the motto, do unto others as you'd have done unto yourself. And if you ask yourself very, deeply, is doing what I'm doing now going to benefit everybody else and myself at the same time? If the answer is no, then and you don't care, then you're a piece of shit person. And let's be honest, you see people out there saying like, oh, you should, it's bad. People that are just scared and they don't necessarily mean what they're saying. Some people mean what they're saying. And those people, if they get sick, that's on them then. And if they die, it's on them. And then there should be no extra help, no on top of or extra, like, there shouldn't be any Kickstarters or GoFundMes to help people who purposely broke the rules of social distancing. If they're like, I wanted to go do this, I went to the beach and I got sick, guess what? You get no extra help because you were fucking stupid.
I mean, there is one side of this I've heard, and sometimes, like, I get where this person's coming from. They talk about people buying non-essential items on a grocery trip. And I get that. Like, you, like, say coloring keeps you grounded, or people that are maybe have mental health issues.
That's fine. It's not the same as somebody saying, I need to go
buy. Yeah, people that are being willfully stupid. Knowing full well the consequences of their actions. I mean, as long as you're taking care of your mental health and whatnot, then yeah, sure. But just don't be stupid with it. But I guess this episode took a very serious turn, and quarantine, I will be honest, it gets to be more when I think about it like this, because I realized this. I think it was Winston Churchill. I think he said something along the lines of, this was referring to Britain in the World War II, but it was something like, this could be Britain's finest hour. Bad things are happening all around the world right now. But if we're willing to band together, maybe something really good can come out of this. And I'm not trying to trivialize all those people that have died and suffered. I'm really not. I'm trying to say, maybe something good can come of this if we're willing to change. And maybe this virus was a terrible, terrible wake-up call. Not the price in blood that we should have paid, because that's terrible, and any loss of life is honestly a tragedy. But if there's anything we can take from this, it should be that there are inequities. They can be fixed now that we see them laid bare. People are flawed. We can help them if they want it. And at the end of the day, treat others as you want to be treated. Love thy neighbor. And just because somebody has a job that you don't like doesn't mean it's not necessary. Like, when I think of all the people ordering Skip the Dishes or DoorDash or Uber Eats right now, you be fucking thankful to those people. Like, I've heard for years, why don't you just get a job flipping burgers and all that shit. That was always the default response from people when people talked about the job's necessary, but you shouldn't be paid well for it. Well, hasn't that conversation fucking turned on you now, hasn't it? Because those people are now important. And honestly, they always have been. Because any job anybody does means something. From the Walmart greeter, which is a job that probably doesn't exist right now, but you get my point. Everybody's important. And we need to remember that. We need to remember the humanity to each other. But like Alex said, if you're going to be willfully stupid, endangering others, then my sympathy kind of runs out for you. So I don't know whether I'm sending mixed messages or not. I think it's time to end this show on a more positive note. So we're going to take a review of one of Alex's movies that he got. And this is Anthony Hopkins in, what's this movie called again?
It's called Magic. It's from 1978. He plays an American ventriloquist where the dummy may start talking to him or he may be insane. And it becomes a psychological horror from there.
A joy for the whole family. We'll be back,
yes,
guys.
Indeed.
Joy for the whole family, I'm sure. We'll be back, guys, right after this, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
The other day I got a knock at the door and there was a package from across the pond, from England. And I was like, what could possibly be there? And I forgot that I was going to be sent a new Blu-ray copy of Magic from Second Sight Films. Now, what is Magic? It's a movie from the late 70s starring Anthony Hopkins, a psychological sort of horror film where you see somebody sort of falling apart. Interesting movie. Anthony Hopkins puts on an American accent that's really interesting, and it's actually pretty good. I'll sort of read you the front of the box. Abracadabra, I sit on his knee. Presto changeo, and now he is me. Hocus pocus, we take her to bed. Magic is fun. We're dead. It's got a very similar cover and style to those, was it Night of the Living Dummy, the Goosebumps books and TV episodes from when I was a kid. But yes, it's about a ventriloquist, and here is the description on the back. Shy, failing magician Corky finally finds success with a ventriloquist act featuring a dummy called Fats. With a shot at the big time on the horizon, the pressure gets the better of him, however, and in a panic, he flees the city back to the scrutiny of his hometown. When he reunites with an old high school flame, Fats takes on a life of his own with devastating consequences. Really good character study. I had never even heard of this movie before, and then when I had the option to check it out, I was like, why not? Now, as far as other people in this, Anne Margaret co-stars, Burgess Meredith is in here, which is pretty fantastic. It's directed by Richard Attenborough, who you might know, you know his brother, David Attenborough, from all those nature documentaries, but Richard Attenborough was in The Great Escape, fantastic actor. You probably know him best as the grandfather on Jurassic Park. But yes, he was a film director as well as an actor, and it was a really well done, really well remastered movie. It looks a lot better than I would have expected. It comes in a really cool black Blu-ray case. Now, it is Region B. I popped it into my players, and it seemed to work just fine, and I have a Region A player, so your mileage may vary, but it is worth definitely checking out if you're a big fan of Anthony Hopkins, because this is a movie that doesn't have, I don't even believe it has a DVD release here, but there's a UK Blu-ray release, and if you're one of our UK fans, you might want to check it out. As far as special features are concerned, they have included the original mono track. There is a misprint, I noticed personally, on the back of the box. It says there's a DTS HD audio mono track. It's actually not HD DTS audio. It's fully uncompressed PCM audio, meaning it's even higher quality than that. So, it's a misprint, but it's a misprint in our favor because it doesn't require a DTS decoder. It just will play as is in anything. There is subtitles for the hearing impaired, which is cool if you need that. No other language is included. It's about an hour and 40-ish minutes or so. Now, the special features, there's a screenwriting for dummies, interview with William Goldman, who was one of the screenwriters. There's an archival interview with Anthony Hopkins from the 70s. There is an interview with the cinematographer. That one's new, and Margaret's makeup test. There's also a history of ventriloquism with the film's consultant, Anthony Hopkins' archival radio interviews. There's a couple of them. Basically, it has a couple still images while you listen to the radio interview. It's kind of neat that they put that in there. Trailer and TV spots and some other radio shorts. Overall, a pretty good release. I'm going to give it a recommend. It's not what I thought. It's not going to be like this huge, like, demonic, slasher flick. It's more of a psychological horror character study, which is pretty cool because it has a lot of really good actors, good director, and it's nice seeing Anthony Hopkins and stuff that I'd never even seen him in before, or never even knew he was in before. So I'm going to say Second Sight hit it out of the park with this, so it's pretty good. I'll put links in the description. I'll even see if I can put a link to the trailer of it for you, because it's worth checking out just to see if it's up your alley.
That's it! He's been kidnapped by the ghost of Liberace!
Well, that's not the way I intended this show to go, but you know what? That's okay. Sometimes we like to get really in touch with our feelings here on Twig, and we've never shied away from being too political, but me and Alex were talking off air, and maybe the show went a little bit more in that direction than we intended. But
yeah, this wasn't a case of me sitting here going, "Oh God, Don, what are you doing?" It was me here going, "Oh, so this is where we're going to go."
Yeah, it's more or less, at the end of the day, the big takeaway message we want you all to take is be good to each other, help each other, think beyond the next 5 minutes, think long term, like, just don't be bad people. I guess there's no other way to really sum it up as succinctly and simply as that. I don't know. Like, I haven't gotten this impassioned since we talked about gun control on this show. And I don't know. I guess the pandemic certainly brings out certain thoughts, feelings, and emotions, as it most often does with people, because we are getting daily briefings from our leaders, which is great in a sense, but we are still getting ongoing communication. And that's something that we've always been with you, our audience, is we've always been very transparent about how we feel. And we don't want to lie to you. And even Alex was saying to me, "Mike, are you sure you want to go down this road?" And I've never said anything I haven't been afraid to say in public, because you guys know I live a very open thought process with my people, my friends, my fans, and you, the listeners. So I just want you people to be good to each other. If you can do something good this week for someone somehow, then do so. Write a letter, call somebody, reach out. If you know someone's lonely, say, "Hey man, what's going on?" If you can figure a way within social distancing to help someone out, do so. If you can pick up some groceries for your neighbor, do that. If you can donate to your local food banks or local charities, do that. Charity is important right now. Being human is important right now. And I think that's the big takeaway message. I want this entire show to be about. Yeah, we had some laughs. Yeah, we had some giggles. But it got political, and I don't apologize for that. I do apologize for how long it went on, but the core message is what I want you people to take away from it. Just yeah,
okay. Maybe refrain from the "you people" there, Don Jerry.
Yeah, just
I want
basically
one thing. I want everyone, not
everyone.
You people, as in you dirty Americans or you foreigners. No, you people, as in everybody.
Everyone. Yeah. I'm using it in the colloquial term. Yeah, I want everyone to be the best they can be, because while this may be a dark time, maybe something good can come out of it. And I hope that's not naive. I really genuinely hope not. So with that in mind, thank you for listening to this show. I'm actually getting a little emotional right now. Not the show I intended to record, but I don't know. It is what it is. It's in the can, and there it'll stay.
I remember receiving a message saying, let's make this a fun and happy show.
Well, yeah, I don't know. And that's the thing. And I guess that's always the ever evolving nature of this show. We don't know how it's going to come out until we start performing the show. Because me and Alex, we always do the show as we call it live to tape. If this was over the radio, this is how you would hear it.
Yeah, very few.
There are no second takes.
We will only do a second take if you, which doesn't happen as often as it used to, fuck up the intro.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Birdman fucking Dodd, and you'll be burp, and you're like, oh fuck, 10 seconds. or the occasional you'll start and then the cat will knock something over, or as we remember a couple years ago, a fire started. But that was in the middle of the show, so we couldn't restart.
Yeah.
It's Blair, what's all that noise? Turn off the fire alarm. Well, what do you want me to do? Turn off the fire alarm or stop the fire? There's a fire. Yeah, so other than that, or if we've only, I think, in 3 years of recording together, ever had to restart completely once, and not because of technical issues, but where you were like, I forget what it was, but I remember you saying, I don't like the road this is going down. Let's just restart and start from scratch.
Yeah, which is very different because I'm a perfectionist. I'm used to just getting it right. And with you, you're like, let's just go with it. And
because if we say something wrong, then we'll just come on in the next show or make an amendment saying, hey, we were wrong about that.
Yeah, so it's two very different approaches, but it's worked out well, where we found a happy balance between the two.
I think. We did one time. You scrapped an entire news segment.
Yeah, because something came out in it.
Because two pieces of news that you found out later on were not true.
Yeah, because I didn't source my sources properly.
Yeah.
Now I'm extra careful.
You were beating yourself up real bad. And I remember saying, hey, let's just put a notification in here saying that this was wrong. And you're like, if it was one, it was one thing. But the problem was it was two separate stories, one at the beginning and one at the end. And you're like, you know what? Fuck it. This news section, this segment this week is cursed. We're not doing it.
Yep. Like, fuck it. Eat shit. Yeah, that was like a weird news segment.
Yeah, I think we put in an extra review instead or something.
Something like that, yeah. So that's one thing we always like being with you listeners, is we like being transparent about our processes. And our processes are unique. So speaking of processes, there is a lot coming up on the site in the next couple of weeks. And I do mean that. We have a lot of interviews coming up in the next little bit. We talked with David Weiner of In Search of Tomorrow, who's the director of In Search of Darkness, the 80s documentary about horror movies we talked about in October. He's doing a new Kickstarter for a 80s documentary focused on sci-fi. So Transformers, Aliens, Terminators, Trancers, Cherry 2000, and more will be covered in this extensive documentary, which is expected to come out sometime next year. This is the first Kickstarter. So you can find out more information on Tuesday about that documentary and its Kickstarter. We'll also be talking with Andrew Ines, who's the inventor and CEO of Anomia Press. And he talks about his card game Anomia, which is surprisingly fun. And I got my ass handed to me by Blair. And that'll be pretty neat. The week after that, we will have more interviews from the RPG industry. I know Monday I'm interviewing Aaron Pauly. He's the freelance writer we've had on Future Imperfect for the last couple episodes, talking about Star Trek Picard. I'm going to be talking about his role-playing game Starts. He's worked on Star Trek Adventures. He's worked in the Battletech universe. And I'm sure he's worked on several other lines I just don't know of. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. And that interview will be out sometime soon. Plus, I'm going to be talking with somebody who's been involved in the old White Wolf franchises for quite a number of years. And I'm going to be talking to a girl I have known for a number of years. I've known her husband for quite some time, but she also has quite the RPG cred to her name as well. We'll be talking with her sometime soon. Plus, I am also going to be talking with a director of one of my favorite horror movies. I'm just waiting to get some scheduling down, and we may have a superstar on the show, but I'm still waiting for confirmation of her schedule. So that's all I can really
on top
say
of that, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we have 5 different prototype episodes 3 are recorded and ready to schedule. We have the long-awaited, soon, discussion on Persona 5 Royal, as well as Persona 5 and the differences. Then the last one in the bunch is going to be the Final Fantasy VII Remake discussion. But on top of that, we have actually Future Imperfect coming, I believe, this week again.
Yep.
We have where we discussed our two of our favorite sci-fi shows for, either growing up and what do they mean to us, sort of thing. As well as is this a week that we get another Fools Who Ride, or is
I think so. I know for Nerds of the Third Power, we record we don't record. We talk about our planning session, what we're going to talk about in the next cycle. I know there is talk of a Fools Who Ride season 2, and considering we're in pandemic lockdown, what better time than the present to play RPGs? Because I was planning a private RPG, but that kind of fell apart. So we're going to do it for a show instead. So look forward to that. So anyway, I guess for This Week in Geek, we have been
Alex, the producer.
I've been Mike, the Birdman Dodd, or as my friend Jackie Bam Bam might say, be cool, be kind, be careful. We'll catch you guys next time right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Well, that's our show. All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at ThisWeekInGeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net and follow our Instagram at twig_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.